is one God. That's from Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. In other words, oneness or wholeness was one of the essential characteristics of God that the Jews embraced. In fact, we talk about this a lot in sisterhood, but the world that the nation of Israel was birthed out of, there was not one God. There were many gods and different gods over different things. They believed that they were often at war with each other. I mean, there weren't actually other gods. This is what they believed. Just in case you're wondering, I'm not a pantheist. It's good. But they believed there were different gods over different things, and they were frequently at war with each other, and they had selfish motives and their gods were very human-like. It would be almost like we think of superheroes today. Like they were very human, they were immortal, and they had certain powers that they could exercise over their area of influence or whatever. But there wasn't one God. So one of the first things that God wanted the Israelites to know about him was, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. His oneness, his wholeness was one of the most essential characteristics about himself that he wanted them to know. And some other things in the Bible, Exodus 3:14, when Moses asked God, who shall I say has sent me? And God answered Moses and said, tell them I am who I am. I am who I am. God didn't say, well, go tell them this, that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent you, and this is who we are, and don't you remember when Joseph came here, and he did this for you, and I'm that God. He wouldn't limit himself by describing himself in human terms. He said, you go tell them, I am who I am, the one God, the all in all, the all-sufficient one, Elohim. I am the one who sent you. He didn't limit himself by trying to divide himself and put himself in categories. He said, I just am. This is who I am. I sent you. So I love that. James 1:17 describes God. It says, there is no shadow. It says, every good and perfect gift comes from God above, with whom there is no shadow of turning. One of the messages of the Bible says his character is consistent through and through. God never, ever, ever considers, should he tell the truth. He never stops in his tracks and goes, I wonder if I ought to honor this commitment. He never considers, I wonder if I should honor my word. I wonder if I ought to follow through. God never, there's no shadow of turning. He's perfect. He casts no shadow. He never changes. He is perfect in his integrity through and through because his word and his will are always in alignment. His character and his actions are always in alignment. His words, his actions, and his will are always in alignment. There's no splintering there. That's incredible. He is one, and he wants us to be whole in the same way. And through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, he gives us the power to do that. It's amazing. He's the perfect example of wholeness. None of us will ever be there this side of eternity, but we can look to him to see what true wholeness looks like. That's shalom wholeness. Not only do you do what is right, but you want to do what is right, and you do it without fail. And it satisfies your deepest desires because your deepest desires are to do what's right. I honestly can't imagine what that must feel like. I'm very excited to find out when I get to heaven. So another one, James 8, we talk about if you need wisdom. This is one of the things that I wrote down in my scriptures. It says, this is a familiar verse, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tested and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything for the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And I used to read this and go, okay, if I go to God in prayer and I ask God for wisdom, but if there's anything in me that doesn't believe he's really going to answer me, then he's not going to answer me. And then it would sit me on this super analytical, but now I don't believe because I'm worried that I don't believe. But now since I don't believe because I'm worried that I don't believe, now I know it's like, I'm just not even going to pray. It's too stressful. So have y'all ever done that before? Has anybody ever been, psychotic like that? Okay, good. I'm not the only one. So I'm like, I'll just put it aside and I'll pray tomorrow and I'm not thinking about this anymore. But I went and I looked at it closer, and that word double-minded, let him who asks, ask without doubting. It's not doubting that God will answer you, but it's doubting the answer he gives. In other words, when he says, when you come to God and you ask for his wisdom, don't come to see what he says and then weigh it against your options. When you come to God and ask him for an answer, come with a heart that's ready to obey. And that's what he means by that man is double-minded in all his ways. If we're coming to God and asking for his answer only to see if it's better than the option we currently have, then we're double-minded. Integrity means, God, whatever your answer is, I'm wholeheartedly devoted to doing it to my best ability. And that leads me to my next thing. People of integrity are not perfect, but are wholeheartedly devoted to following the paths of righteousness. When Jesus said in the Beatitudes, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. He didn't mean that blessed are the people who never have any sin or division in their heart. What he means is the people whose heart is 100% devoted. The king of your heart is God. There's no other king. You're not double-minded. People with integrity are not perfect. Nobody has perfect integrity. No one has perfect wholeness, but we can be wholeheartedly devoted to following righteousness. I'm not perfect. I do not have perfect integrity. There are times I commit to things and I have to cancel, or I say I'm going to be here at a certain time and I show up late, or I don't always keep my word perfectly. I don't always do my very best A-level work every single time. But in my heart of hearts, I know I'm devoted to following the paths of righteousness, and I let his word be my standard and my guide and my judge. I don't make excuses for those things. I think the ability to own up to your shortcomings instead of deflect them, because it's hard to look at yourself and go, I really dropped the ball there. I said I would do this and I didn't do it. I took on too much and now I can't carry out everything that I thought I was going to be able to do. It's really hard to be honest and admit our limitations and our failures. But the ability to own up and say that and to do that actually brings more healing than hiding will ever bring. So I'm going to name a few things, just a few areas that we can have purity in our life. We can have integrity in our lives and the way that they'll impact us. And this will help. This is all kind of tied into our yoke as well. We've talked about all these areas, but now let's talk about having integrity. One of the first things we need to do, integrity with our money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we've just talked about generosity a few weeks ago, but having integrity with our money. It's huge to have integrity with our money. Like Rachel came up here and we had that video of you gave toward this is what we've done with it. We had leftover. We would like to let you know this is what we're doing with the leftover money. Like, we really do care that you understand what we're doing with the money that you give in offerings and tithes. Money is a very sensitive issue for people. And it should be. And it's important that we handle our money wisely, and that we pay our bills on time. I'm not trying to condemn anyone. I know it's rough times financially, but when we look at the way we spend our money, we need to also think of it as a reflection of our integrity. Because if we can't make our bills, if we're buying things that we can't afford, then that reflects not just on, oh well, I guess I just couldn't make their bills this month. It actually reflects on our integrity. Being honest about our money, being honest with your taxes. Being honest, one of the things I hear I think about money is, and I think women are really bad about this, but we think of it like bargain hunting, swindling, trying to get something for such a low price that it doesn't give the seller or the vendor what their service is really worth. It might make you feel good to get that for that cheap, but what about the person who's giving you the deal? Is that enough for them? I think we can pride ourselves on getting things so cheap, but whenever you get something for so cheap that the other person is cheated out of a profit, the fair wages of their labor, is called swindling. So we can't be so obsessed with bargains that we swindle people out of their rightful due. The Bible says the workman is worthy of his hire, and we need to be honest with that kind of stuff and don't try to swindle people to get more than we actually should have. Let's just be patient, and God will provide. The other thing is integrity with our commitments. And Liz did a great job talking about our yoke. If we overschedule, and then I believe Leah spoke about schedule, but if we're overscheduling and overcommitted, if we're driven by ambition or guilt instead of by the rhythms of grace, it's going to be really hard for us to have integrity in our commitments. If you overschedule every single week and overcommit to things, it's going to be really hard to let your yes be yes and your no be no. Not because you don't want to have integrity, right? But because really you can't do all the things that you've committed to do. So having margin in your week. I talk about margin all the time. I've got some posts on my blog about it. You have to have margin because I always say expect the unexpected. Well, you just need to realize the unexpected is going to happen in your life. You can't have yourself so booked up that if one thing goes wrong, you're free, it pushes you over the edge. I lived like that for a long time. And I felt so bad about seeing blank spots in my calendar, like a day where there was nothing scheduled. But you know what, that day that's nothing scheduled, I'm not even talking about a day off. I mean hours at a time where there's no meetings, no nothing. It allows me when my mom calls with a need from Baton Rouge that I have time to respond to her. When my children have something come up, it allows me to respond. Margin allows you to respond to legitimate needs. It allows you the space to build and invest in relationships. So if we have every single minute of our day filled up back to back to back to back, we're not making room in our lives for things that come up, and things come up. So you have to factor that in, and if we're overcommitted in our schedules, we will have trouble having integrity with our commitments, right? And that impacts people. I was reading on Twitter last night because this is what I do before I go to bed. Steve all falls asleep, and I have to read myself to sleep. Like, I can't just get in bed. And he can get in bed, watch a Seinfeld, and he sounds like a silverback ape, dying and the snoring. But I have to read myself to sleep. So sometimes I'll get on Twitter and read what people have been doing, and I'll follow. Sometimes I'll look at hashtags. And one of the hashtags that people said is, "It makes me mad when people say." That's a really long hashtag. But it says, makes me mad when people say, and one that got retweeted all the time is, "We need to get together," or "I miss you," but they don't do anything about it. And I mean, we've all said that, like friends that we haven't connected with in a long time, they'll say, "I really miss you, let's get together," but they never follow through, and you're like, I guess you don't really miss me that much. I'm good, but I guess you just don't really care as much as you're saying. But we have to we have to have margin in our lives to make room for relationships. And that's not to bring guilt, it's a process. I'm still uncluttering my schedule. I mean, I uncluttered it so much, and I'm like, I can't unclutter more than this, but I'm still finding ways that I clutter my schedule. And I have to realize what's driving me. Is guilt driving me? Is ambition driving me? Am I really supposed to be involved in this? I mean, the pastor in me wants to be involved in things and fix lots of stuff, but that doesn't mean that I should, because sometimes I'm not supposed to be the one giving the solution. So we have to just be wise about what we're supposed to be involved in, because people will let you carry their crisis. Okay, so the other thing, personal honesty. This is a good one. Have integrity in personal honesty. Honesty, let's just talk about honesty in general. Let's have a commitment to truth-telling as a group of women. Truth-telling. And I'm not talking about the kind of truth-telling that's like, "Girl, please." I'm just keeping it real. Not tactless and mean. It's not truth-telling, that's just tactless and mean. I'm talking about when someone says to you, "Did this bother you?" You maybe take a deep breath and go, "It really did. I know you didn't mean it that way, but it really bothered me." Instead of going, "Oh no, I'm good," and then going in your car and crying for 30 minutes. Okay, why? Why do we need to have a commitment to personal honesty? When you are bothered by something and a person that you're involved with senses it, and they come to you and say, "I feel like that may have really bothered you," and you're like, "No. What have you just done?" You've created a gap between your inner world and your outer world. Now, a gap probably already existed. Here's the gap. What's in that gap? A fear to admit your needs, a fear of appearing weak. Maybe you've judged other people that have appeared weak to you, and now that judgment's returning on you because you've meted it out to other people. Maybe you're hurt and you want to cut that person off, and so that's your first step. So there's already a gap there, and it's a gap of maybe pain or fear or whatever it is. And when you then say, "Oh, no, I'm good," what you do is you put like a wedge in that gap, and you go, and you widen it a little bit. And what happens is you're going to find yourself in that relationship standing on one side of the gap or the other. But you can't really straddle a gap that wide. You're either going to choose the inner side or the outer side. To choose the inner side is to live in harmony with yourself, conflict with your brother. To choose the outer side is to live in harmony with your brother and in conflict with yourself. What do we want to do? We want to close the gap so that we can live in conflict, in harmony with ourselves, and in conflict with our brother. In harmony with our brothers. Nothing like just messing up a good tweetable line with a mess up, right? Okay, we want to live in harmony with ourselves and with others. And the only way to do that is to close the gap between our inner and outer world. And the only way to do that